Jack Mercer hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 weeks, and that's exactly how he liked it. He rode his horse across the northern fence line of his 400-acre ranch in the Montana Territory, checking for breaks after the storm. The wind still bit cold even in late spring of 1887. He pulled his worn leather collar up and kept moving, the creak of his saddle the only sound for miles. That's when he saw it. Smoke. Thin gray smoke rising from the old bunkhouse near the creek, the one he hadn't used in 5 years. Jack's jaw tightened beneath his graying beard. Someone was on his land. He spurred his horse forward, hand instinctively moving to the Winchester rifle strapped to his saddle. Out here in the territories, trespassers meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing he wanted. When he reached the bunkhouse, he dismounted and kicked the weathered door open, hinges groaning. Inside, a woman screamed. 2 kids, a boy about 8 and a girl no older than 5, scrambled behind her, eyes wide with terror. Jack froze. The woman stood in front of them like a shield, trembling but defiant. Her dress was worn and patched, her face pale and exhausted beneath a faded bonnet. But her eyes? They burned with a mother's fierce protection. "Please," she whispered. "Please, don't hurt us." Jack lowered the rifle slowly. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" We didn't know anyone lived here. The bunkhouse looked abandoned. We just needed somewhere to stay for a few nights. We'll leave, I promise." Jack looked around. A small fire crackling in the old potbelly stove. Threadbare blankets spread on the floor. A tin of beans open on the rickety table. They weren't just passing through. They were desperate. "Few nights?" Jack said coldly. "Looks like you've been here longer than that." The woman's lip quivered. 4 days. 4 days. Jack shook his head. "You're squatting. That's illegal, even out here." "I know. I'm sorry. We had nowhere else to go." The little girl peeked out from behind her mother, clutching a cloth doll with button eyes and one arm missing. Jack felt something twist in his chest. He shoved it down hard. "Pack your things," he said. "You've got 7 days. After that, I'm riding into town and bringing back the sheriff." The woman's face crumbled, but she nodded. "Thank you." Jack turned and walked out before he could see her cry, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. If you're still here, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. Trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. Jack rode back to the main house, but he couldn't shake the image of those kids. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He didn't owe them anything. He'd given them a week. That was more than most ranchers would do. Hell, some men would have run them off at gunpoint. But that night, lying in his bed in the empty house, he kept seeing the little girl's face. Those wide, frightened eyes. It reminded him of someone he'd lost a long time ago. He pushed the thought away and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, he rode out to check the south pasture. On his way back, he passed the bunkhouse again. The boy was outside, trying to chop firewood with a hatchet that was way too big for him. He swung hard, missed, and the blade buried itself in the dirt inches from his own foot. Jack pulled his horse to a stop. "You're gonna lose a toe doing it like that." The boy jumped, startled. He looked up at Jack with a mix of fear and defiance, his face smudged with dirt. "I can do it," the boy said, voice shaking but stubborn. "Didn't say you couldn't, said you're doing it wrong." Jack dismounted with a grunt, his knees protesting. He walked over and took the hatchet from the boy's small hands. He positioned the log properly on the stump, showed the boy where to aim, and handed it back. "Hit it there. Let the weight do the work. Don't fight it." The boy tried again, mimicking Jack's stance. This time, the log split clean down the middle. His face lit up like a lantern. Jack nodded once, then mounted his horse and rode off without another word, ignoring the "thank you, mister" that followed him. Day 2. Jack told himself he was just checking the fence line, but somehow he ended up near the bunkhouse again. The woman was outside, hanging wet clothes on a makeshift line strung between 2 trees. She saw him and stiffened, wiping her hands on her apron. "We're not causing trouble," she said quickly. We'll be gone in 5 days. Jack didn't respond. He noticed the roof of the bunkhouse. Shingles missing, a canvas tarp poorly tied down and flapping in the wind. "Storm's coming tonight," he said, eyes on the dark clouds gathering to the west. "That tarp won't hold. We'll manage." Jack stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned his horse around without a word. An hour later, he came back with a ladder, a hammer, and a box of nails. The woman watched in silence as he climbed up and started fixing the roof, replacing the rotted shingles with spare ones from his barn. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Roof's part of my property." Jack muttered around the nails in his mouth. "Not doing it for you." But they both knew that wasn't true. When he finished, the little girl came outside and looked up at him with those big eyes. "Thank you, mister," she said softly, hugging her one-armed doll. Jack didn't know what to say, so he just tipped his hat and left, his throat tight. Day 3. Jack woke up planning to avoid the bunkhouse entirely. But when he went to feed the horses in the corral, he found the boy there, standing on the bottom rail of the fence, staring at the animals with longing. "You ever ridden one?" Jack asked. The boy shook his head, not taking his eyes off the horses. Jack sighed. "Come on." He saddled up his gentlest mare, a dappled gray named Molly, and helped the boy climb on. The kid's face was pure terror and excitement all at once, his small hands gripping the saddle horn like his life depended on it. Jack led the horse around the corral, one hand on the reins, the other ready to catch the boy if he slipped. "What's your name?" Jack asked. "Eli." "You scared, Eli?" "A little." "Good. Means you're paying attention. A man who ain't scared of a horse is a fool. They're bigger than you, stronger than you, and they know it. But you're not scared. I respect 'em. That's different." By the end of the lesson, Eli was grinning ear to ear, sitting a little straighter in the saddle. Jack felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. "All right, I need to know. Do you think Jack's going to let them stay, or is he going to stick to the 7-day rule? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I'm curious what you think." That evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky orange and purple, there was a knock on Jack's door. He opened it, surprised. The woman stood there, holding a pot wrapped in a cloth. "I made extra stew," she said. "It's not much, but I wanted to say thank you. For the roof, and for being kind to Eli." Jack hesitated. He hadn't had a home-cooked meal in years. Hadn't sat at a table with another person since— "Come in," he said. They sat at his table. Him, the woman, Eli, and the little girl, whose name was Rosie. It was awkward at first. The silence stretched long, but then Rosie started talking about the rabbit she'd seen that morning, and Eli asked Jack about the horses, and slowly, the tension melted like snow in spring. The woman's name was Claire. She told him her story. Her husband, Thomas, had been a good man, a carpenter. They'd had a small house in a town 2 territories over. But 3 years ago, he'd been killed in an accident at a construction site. A beam had fallen. He died instantly. Claire had tried to keep going. She'd taken in sewing, done laundry, worked herself to the bone. But then she got sick with fever and couldn't work for 2 months. She fell behind on everything. That's when Vincent Hale came to her. Hale was a loan shark who dressed like a gentleman. He wore fine suits and spoke with a smooth tongue. He offered her help, a loan, he said, with reasonable terms. But the terms weren't reasonable. The interest was criminal, 20% a month, compounding. And when she couldn't pay, Hale took everything. Her house, her husband's tools, even the furniture. She and the kids had been living in a covered wagon, moving from town to town, looking for work. But no one wanted to hire a woman with 2 small children. They were a liability. The wagon had broken an axle 20 miles from Jack's ranch. They'd walked the rest of the way, carrying what little they had left. "I'm not a freeloader," Claire said, voice shaking. I needed time to figure things out, to find work, to save enough to move on." Jack didn't say anything for a long time. He stared at his empty bowl. Then he stood up. "You've got 7 days," he said. "That hasn't changed." Claire's face fell. She nodded and gathered the kids, her hands trembling. But as they reached the door, Jack added quietly, "After that, we'll see." Claire looked back at him, hope flickering in her tired eyes. Day 4. Jack found himself spending more time around the bunkhouse. He told himself it was just to keep an eye on things, make sure they weren't stealing or causing damage. But really, he liked the sound of the kids laughing. He taught Eli how to mend a fence, showing him how to twist the wire tight. He let Rosie feed the chickens, watching as she giggled when they pecked grain from her small hands. Claire started cooking meals for all of them, and Jack found himself looking forward to supper. It felt like something Jack had lost a long time ago. Family. He'd had one once, a wife, a daughter. But that was before the fever took them both in the same winter, 15 years ago. He'd buried them on the hill overlooking the ranch and hadn't spoken their names since. He'd told himself he was better off alone. But now, watching Eli learn to rope a fence post and Rosie chase butterflies, he wasn't so sure. Day 5. Jack was in the barn, mucking out stalls, when Claire came running in, breathless and pale as a ghost. "He's here," she gasped. "Who?" "Vincent Hale, the man who took everything from us. He found us." Jack's blood went cold. He grabbed his rifle and walked outside. A fancy black carriage was parked near the bunkhouse, pulled by 2 sleek horses. A man in an expensive suit stood beside it, smiling like a snake that had just cornered a mouse. Vincent Hale. He was younger than Jack expected, maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a gold watch chain glinting in the sun. Well, Hale said, his voice smooth as oil. "Claire, I've been looking everywhere for you." "You need to leave," Claire said, voice trembling but firm. "Leave? But you still owe me, sweetheart. $1,200 plus interest. That's $1,800 now. I don't have it." "I know. That's why I'm here to collect other ways." His eyes flicked to Eli and Rosie, who were hiding behind their mother. "Strong boy like that could work off the debt, and the girl, well, I know people who'd pay good money for a—" Jack stepped forward, rifle in hand. "She said leave." Hale looked Jack up and down, amused. "And who are you? The landlord?" "Something like that." "Well, landlord, this is between me and Claire. So why don't you mind your business and go back to your cows?" Jack's jaw tightened. "You're on my land. That makes it my business?" Hale's smile faded. "You don't want to get involved in this, old man. I have the law on my side. She signed a contract." "Don't care what she signed. You should. Because if you interfere, I'll have the sheriff drag you to jail for obstruction." Jack took another step forward, close enough that Hale could see the cold fury in his eyes. "You threaten those kids again, and the sheriff's gonna be dragging your body back to town." Hale stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "Fine, I'll be back. And next time, I'm bringing the sheriff and a judge's order. She signed a legal contract. It's all binding." He climbed into his carriage and snapped the reins, driving off in a cloud of dust. Claire collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Jack helped her up, his hand gentle on her arm. "He's not taking you," Jack said quietly. "Or the kids. You don't understand. He has lawyers, papers. I signed everything. I was desperate and stupid and I don't care what you signed. Jack, you can't fight him. He'll destroy you. He's destroyed everyone who's ever stood up to him." Jack looked her in the eyes. Let him try. Day 6. Jack rode into town at dawn. The nearest settlement was 15 miles away, a dusty collection of buildings called Silver Creek. He found the only lawyer in town, a man named Samuel Pritchard, working out of a cramped office above the general store. Jack explained the situation. Pritchard listened, then shook his head. "If she signed a contract, there's not much you can do." "Hale's a predator, but he's careful. Everything he does is technically legal. He's been running this scheme for years. There's gotta be something." Pritchard thought for a moment, stroking his beard. "If you could prove coercion, fraud, or that the terms were unconscionable, maybe, but that takes time, witnesses, evidence, and money for court fees." "How much?" more than most people have, $2, maybe $300, and that's if we win. Jack stood up. Send me the bill. Pritchard raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Dead serious. Why? You don't even know this woman. Jack paused at the door. Maybe that's why. Day 7. Jack walked to the bunkhouse that morning, heart heavy. Claire was packing their few belongings into a worn canvas bag. You don't have to leave, Jack said. She looked at him, tears in her eyes. You said 7 days. I changed my mind. Jack, stay. I mean it. Stay as long as you need. Why are you doing this? Jack looked at Eli and Rosie, then back at Claire. Because I've been alone long enough. Claire broke down crying. Jack awkwardly put a hand on her shoulder, not sure what else to do. We're gonna fight Hale, Jack said, and we're gonna win. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. Jack hired Pritchard to start building a case. The lawyer dug into Hale's past dealings and found a pattern of predatory loans, forged signatures, and intimidation. Meanwhile, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Eli learned to ride properly, no longer needing Jack to lead the horse. Rosie helped Claire with the garden they'd started behind the bunkhouse, and every evening they all ate together. Jack found himself smiling more, talking more, living more, but he knew it couldn't last. Hale would come back. And when he did, there'd be hell to pay. 2 weeks and 3 days after the confrontation, Hale returned. This time, he had the sheriff with him. Sheriff Tom Briggs was a decent man, but he followed the law. And the law, unfortunately, was on Hale's side. She's got a legal debt, Hale said smugly, standing beside the sheriff's horse. I'm here to collect. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. He'd known Jack for years. Ma'am, is this true? Did you sign a contract with Mr. Hale? Claire nodded, defeated. Yes. Then I'm afraid she's not going anywhere, Jack interrupted, stepping forward. Hale laughed. You can't stop this, cowboy. The law's the law. Maybe not, but I can pay her debt. Hale's smile faltered. What? Jack pulled out a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket. $1,800. That's what she owes, right? He handed the paper to the sheriff. It was a bank draft, signed and certified. Hale's face went from smug to red in seconds. You can't. I just did. Now get off my land. The sheriff looked at the draft, then at Hale. Looks like the debt's settled, Vincent. But she signed a contract. There are penalties, fees. The contract says she owes $1,800. That's what's here. The sheriff handed the draft to Hale. You've been paid in full. Hale sputtered, furious, but there was nothing he could do. He snatched the draft and climbed into his carriage, whipping the horses harder than necessary. As he drove off, he shouted back, This isn't over, Mercer. But it was. The sheriff tipped his hat to Jack. You're a good man, Jack. Just doing what's right. After the sheriff left, Claire stared at Jack in shock. Why would you do that? That's your life savings. Jack looked at her, then at the kids. Money comes and goes, but family, that's worth more than gold. Claire threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. Jack held her, awkward but genuine. Your family now, he said quietly. All of you? 6 months later. The bunkhouse was no longer a temporary shelter. It was a home. Jack had helped Claire fix it up properly. New furniture, curtains on the windows, a real bed for the kids. Eli had learned to ride like he was born in the saddle. He helped Jack with the cattle, mended fences, and even started learning to rope. Rosie had named every chicken on the ranch and insisted on collecting the eggs every morning. She'd also started calling Jack Papa Jack, which made his throat tight every time. Claire had transformed the small plot behind the bunkhouse into a thriving garden. Tomatoes, beans, squash. She sold the extra produce in town and started saving money. And Jack. Jack wasn't lonely anymore. One evening, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rosie climbed into Jack's lap. Are you our papa now? She asked, looking up at him with those big, trusting eyes. Jack's throat tightened. He looked at Claire, who was watching him with tears in her eyes and a soft smile on her face. He looked at Eli, who was grinning, Then he looked back at Rosie. "Yeah, kid," Jack said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "I guess I am." Rosie hugged him tight, and Jack closed his eyes, holding her close. For the first time in 15 years, Jack Mercer felt whole. A year later, Jack and Claire were married in a small ceremony in Silver Creek. Eli stood beside Jack as his best man, and Rosie scattered wildflowers down the aisle. They built a new house on the ranch, bigger than the old one, with enough room for everyone. Jack taught Eli everything he knew about ranching, and when Eli turned 16, Jack made him a partner. Rosie grew up strong and smart, eventually becoming a school teacher in Silver Creek. And Claire, she never stopped being grateful. But more than that, she loved Jack with a fierce, loyal love that he'd never thought he'd find again. As for Vincent Hale, he tried to continue his schemes, but word got around about what he'd done. People stopped trusting him. His business dried up. Last anyone heard, he'd left the territory in disgrace. Jack Mercer had spent 15 years alone, convinced that his life was over. But sometimes life gives you a second chance, and sometimes that second chance comes in the form of a desperate widow and 2 scared kids hiding in your bunkhouse. Jack had thought he was saving them, but in the end, they saved him. So what do you think? Could you ever do something like Jack did? Would you take in a family of strangers and risk everything for them? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are more incredible stories coming your way. Thanks for listening.